Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and we've got a really interesting guest on today with Nate Burke. Now, Nate, not only is it interesting that you're a three-time B2B CMO, you've gone through 6 different startups and scales, you constantly are advising early-stage startups, but you and I, in the conversation that we had leading up to this recording session, you just threw something out. You said, well, the funnel's a fraud.
Agreed.
Like, okay, innately, I understand, I believe, but we're going to dig into that big time here. But I want to first talk a little bit about you and your background. And one of the most important things, you absolutely lit up a couple of minutes ago because I said, hey, what's something on the personal side, Nate, that I could share? And you talked about a new camera you got, a digital camera that only shoots in black and white. If I could have grabbed the expression on your face and how proud you were of that, and I'm an avid photographer myself, but I would never give up my color, but I understand the design aesthetics of black and white and how beautiful that is. I would just love to hear from your point of view a little bit more about your background and maybe even why you bonded recently with your daughter, 11-year-old daughter, around WWE.
Oh man, how do I tie black and white cameras with WWE? I'm going to see what I can do here. You gave me a tough assignment. Let's try it. So yeah, I would say that I've been a CMO a couple of times. I'm now at 7AI, and most of my time is in cybersecurity, which is, to me, a lot of fun. If you're going to be a CMO and you're going to be in a place where you want a lot of challenges, cybersecurity is a place for you, where everyone sounds exactly the same and your target audience is immediately skeptical of you, which is a kind of challenge I really love. There's a lot about cybersecurity I'm sure we'll talk about that is unique and that I love about it. I spend a lot of time just thinking about marketing stuff and how to take a company from complete obscurity to something people want to buy. When I get home after a very long day, I spend an awful lot of time with my wife and daughter. My daughter's 11 right now, as we're doing this. She is in the spelling bee final. And I'm hoping that this afternoon she comes in and is very, very excited about that. So she's 11. And as those of you out there with kids know and with daughters know, you have this really small window of time where they still think you're infallible and they want to hang out with you. We were talking earlier. I was trying to figure out what is that thing, right? She's got a lot of things with my wife that they do together that's a lot of fun. And my daughter's very athletic, very competitive, very competitive. I'm like, what is that thing that we can have? And I brought her to a couple of football games. She's not into it. She gets her first snack and she's done. And then I'm like, there's something here though. But she's also very dramatic. She's going to be in a play here soon. She's got her first big role. And so I'm like, oh, I got it. What could bring sports together with drama? And the answer is professional wrestling. So that's another thing we've been really enjoying together. My wife hates it. She thinks it's the dumbest thing. And she's not wrong, but it's still fun. We bridge the gap between drama and sports, and we spend a lot of time joking about it, especially to my wife's eye roll. I've got a lot on my plate, and it's a lot of fun, and I love what I do. And even more than that, I love spending time with the family here.
Well, here's what I take away from that. You're a very creative guy. If you could figure out ways that I've never heard before of people, how they interact with their 11-year-old daughter, I want to translate that over to how do we interact with our buyers? How do we get their attention? You started out our previous conversation saying the funnel's a fraud, and that's where I want to start out here. I'm like, if you could elaborate on that, what do you mean? We understand those words, but if you had to dissect that and say, okay, why did you come to that opinion, and now what do we do about it?
Yeah, and I'm not going to be a politician where I'm just going to answer something else completely and not answer your question. Instead, I'm going to say one thing, and I promise we'll get back to it, and then I'll answer your question. The first thing I want to say is, first, I didn't even talk about the black and white stuff. So let me get back to that real quick, and here's why. One of the things that I believe, and it's going to be very difficult for anyone to try to change my mind on this, is that you've got to be different. When it comes to, and people ask me this with our podcast and the stuff that we put on LinkedIn, it's all in black and white. And it's not just because I love black and white, I do, but it's because it's different. And when you scroll LinkedIn, I dare you to do it today, you're going to see a lot of the same, but you see a black and white, beautiful video come up and you're going to stop and say, what is that? To me, I think the key to everything that I try to do in cybersecurity, especially on the brand side, is everything looks exactly the same. And if I'm a buyer, and this kind of speaks to your question about the buyer, is when everything looks exactly the same, how do you know what to pay attention to? I think that's the biggest part that I've learned is that someone once said this. I wish I could credit them. I'll try to do it when this comes out, but it's this idea that better is subjective, but different you can measure. And I think that's absolutely true. I want to talk about that as we get into some more questions. Your question about the funnel being a fraud. I think one of the things I've learned, and I'm in this luxury position where I get to start over. I've been able to do that a few times. And I think it's really easy to say, I'm just going to run the same playbook and do the same things I've always done. The big problem with that is you've got a ceiling of what you can do, and you know what that ceiling is. If it's already been done, it's probably been played out too. When I think of how we're approaching buyers, this idea that you go after everyone conceivably on earth and you put them in your database, you send them a bunch of emails, and then you make a bunch of phone calls and a bunch of LinkedIn messages, and everyone else is doing that. And then you change it on and flip it on its head and think the last thing that you bought, how did you buy it? Was it because you went to someone's website and you downloaded a white paper, and then 2 weeks later you went to a webinar, and then 3 weeks later you got on a demo call, and then all of these other things happen in the no, like, we don't buy that way anymore. I think the way that we've approached the buying behavior hasn't been updated to what the reality of the world is anymore. This idea of I'm gonna go from a number of leads to MQLs to SQ, like, then you look at how it works in reality. So someone became a customer because they came to our website, but at the same time, someone else went to an event. And then, by the way, our CEO talked to someone they knew at the company who then introduced them to someone else. All of that isn't linear and it's not in a sequence. The real answer is being able to create an experience and to create something where number one, it's different. Number two, it's interesting. And number three, it solves a problem. It's not going to happen through a database. It's not going to happen through some LinkedIn messaging. I just think that just approaching the same way we've always done it is a great way to be completely inefficient, to spend your money like a drunken sailor, knowing that 70% of what you're spending is totally wasted, and then getting into attribution wars with everybody else in your company. It doesn't make sense. We all know it to our core. The real question is, how do we change it in a way that really matters and is repeatable enough that you can sustain a business that way?
I love your quote, and I wrote it down about different is measurable. I love that. You love this. So I had a conversation about 2 months ago. It was on another podcast that I host, and it was with a chief customer officer. His ICP is CISOs, so chief information security officers, who you know really well, right? He said that CISO had just gone through a purchase of, in addition to their tech stack, right? So he was the buyer, the same kind of buyer that you're reaching out to. And he said, we looked at 14 different companies. He said, every single one answered our RFP. Every single one said they checked every single box that they asked us, that we asked them about. And he said, all I wanted to know, and this is what reminded me of this conversation, you talked about creating the right experience. He said, all I want to know is what's the experience going to be of working with you after I hire you? How important is that experience? And how does that relate? You brought it up a couple of times. It reminded me of that story. How to relate that to the funnel as a fraud, like in doing things differently? Like, how does that play together?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think about when we're talking about AI and especially AI and security, which is where we play, is the approach that I see in the market right now is vendors saying, buy my thing. AI does everything and it's perfect. And you don't need people anymore. I would say it makes no sense, but instead I want people to keep doing it because if I'm someone in security and I'm trusting a vendor to do something that is critical to my business, am I going to just say, let something run and let it run in the background? I don't need people looking anymore. And oh, by the way, when something goes wrong at 2 a.m, I'm going to submit a ticket. Or am I going to meet someone in person? Am I going to look them in the eye and I'm going to understand like what they really mean, what they really believe, and do they have my back? And can I trust them? In a world where AI can do a lot of really cool stuff, and it can, the ability to trust the people behind the AI and the people that can actually make the AI do what the vendors say it can do, that is so critical right now. And that's what buyers want. We've had a lot of conversations with CISOs where they're saying, I can't hire enough people in my SOC. And so I want to use something that AI can help me there. But what they're not saying is, I want to throw away my people. I want to get rid of them all. What they're saying is, I've got people that are spending all of their time on things that turn out to be false positives 70% of the time. No one
Mm.
wants to do that. That's why we have churn. That's why we can't hire people. And instead, they're saying, really, what I want to do is I just want to make these people more effective. I want them to be able to grow in their career. I want them to not just be L1 analysts all their life, but instead get in, start doing their jobs that they wanted to do when they got into cybersecurity in the first place. No one ever got into cybersecurity to say, I want to spend 75% of my time bouncing URLs off Virus Total. Not a one. I guarantee it. But instead, they want the career growth. They want to hunt. They want to do the things that are really human and creative. They can do that if they're not spending all their time data questing. All of this is human. If you look at it, it's not just because your thing is faster, and it's not because your thing has more features or you've got crazy good stuff in your roadmap. But whenever I talk to a CISO, I ask them exactly two things. The two things are, what is the work in security that you're trying to get done that either isn't good enough or that you're not doing right now? More important than that, what do you want your people to be doing? Those are the two things that I really care about. And if our product and what we offer fits in, amazing. There's a lot of things we can help with. But instead, I'm not saying take our platform, put it in, change the way you work around it. Oh, by the way, that thing you need, give me like 6, 8 months. We'll put it in the roadmap. We've flipped that on its head to instead, it's almost like a service engagement, going in and saying, what are you trying to solve? What are those things that your people are wasting time on? Then can we help with that? And so that model allows us to get someone like we had one of our biggest customers from first conversation to deployed globally in production with 120,000 employees. It took 8 weeks. It's just different, right? You don't get that through the normal way of doing it where an SE gets on a call, takes a product request, hands it to someone else, they write it up, they hand it to R&D, and then 8 months later, something else comes out that sort of looks like what they wanted in the first place. Instead, we assign a dedicated AI security engineer to every customer. They actually write the code, they can commit it, and they do it in 3-day sprints. And that has just changed the expectations, but also that's not what you're going to get when you go buy something off the shelf.
No. So I so much to unpack there, but one thing in particular, you said there's two questions that you asked. They had nothing to do with your product. And the typical sales strategy is vendors talk about what they do and how it impacts the buyer. What they don't do is say, what do you need to get done? A lot of the answers to the questions that you get, I imagine, are things that aren't always something that your company solves for them. But what you're doing is you're learning what their greatest challenges are. You're learning where their risks are, what they need to get done. And that's the kind of consultative conversation that they want.
And you just said it like I said before, the funnel is a fraud because if what you're saying is, I've got this thing looks like this, you use it this way and no way else. Now I'm going to go take it to people. Hey, we've got this thing. We do it this way. Does this fit you? No? All right. I'm going to go down to the next one. I'm going to go down to the next one. Or you say the world isn't a funnel anymore. It's people that have problems and challenges that they're actually trying to solve and want to solve. I go to them and say, yeah, we've got this thing. We can talk about it. We'll see if it's a fit. But what are you trying to solve? And what do you want your people to do? Great. I can tell you what we do. Let's see if it's a fit. If it is, and then I'm solving the problem that you have that's most acute, that's right in front of you. Think about that experience versus I just buy a thing. You've got people that love what you're able to do for them, and they come back and say, can you do this other thing for me? Maybe we can, maybe we can't, maybe we can in the future. But the difference between someone coming back to you and say, I want you to do more versus, yeah, I bought this product that doesn't really have all the features I want. I guess I got to go look at another product. And then also, by the way, because it's a product that is meant for many people and not just me, I now have to take my people, I have to dedicate people to this tool and change our own internal workflows based on this thing I bought. That's crazy.
So, there was a woman on our podcast about a year ago, and she is a 3-time B2B CMO. She's also a value accelerator advisor with Goldman Sachs. And when I last talked to her a couple of months ago, she had just helped Goldman Sachs commit $100 million into a new startup. So one of the things that she did, and I love that the two questions you asked, she had a question that she asks customers, these are existing customers. And she said, it's the most fruitful conversation that I ask, the best way that I learn. She said, what is it that we do for you? She just opened it up, right? Because we internally, We really know what we do for our customers. We know exactly what we do for them. We know exactly how we benefit them. We know exactly what they need and why they need it. And we're going to build it and then we're going to shove it out their way, right? What I love is that your question and questions like that, these are questions that expand our learning so that we can be perceived as not sellers, but peers, colleagues. That's a completely different conversation, completely different strategy. But here's where I'd love your help in where that can break down. I can see how you can do that. You're very experienced. You're a CMO. You've been around the block a number of times, but speed and momentum to market are something that we have to do to scale. When you took a company from 0 to 100 million, it wasn't just you on the phone all the time, right?
Mhm.
You had to have high performance teams that can then take this kind of a go-to-market strategy, flip that funnel on the fraud, but it has to be scalable. How do we take this kind of engagement in customer insight and be able to scale it?
Yeah, it is a great point, and that's the thing is like the early days are super fun, right? Where it's me and the CEO on every call, and that's it. I can then in the afternoon say, "Oh, let's change our messaging because they said something different." That's easy. And then you add sales and you add a bunch of people, and all of a sudden, like you're not on every call. To me, the only answer to that, and I think we've all in marketing seen it done poorly, which is the relationship between marketing and sales. It's a choice. I'm going to say that again. The relationship between marketing and sales is a choice. You can either have it be I'm marketing, I do marketing, I generate leads and I hand them over. I don't do anything with pipeline. I can't physically create pipeline. It's not my job. I don't go into Salesforce and say, yes, this is a qualified lead. I don't do that. My job is to hand over leads. You know what happens when that's what you do? You hand things over to sales and sales says, your leads suck. They aren't ready. They have never even heard of us. And then marketing says, yeah, well, if you could sell something, they'd be perfect because they downloaded our white paper. So they're obviously ready to buy. Like you've seen that, you've been there. I never want to do that again. Instead, it's okay, well, what are we actually trying to do together? I'll tell you what we're trying to do. We're trying to build pipeline. Awesome. That doesn't mean strictly demand gen. It means we're trying to build pipeline now and in the future because not everybody's ready to buy now. And so we have to be there when they are ready. And to do that, there's a thing called brand that's different from demand, where we have to build something so that when the time is ready, then we are an obvious choice. On the demand side, it's what do we actually really need to do? I mean this in like a spreadsheet straight up form, which is all right, our average sales price is this, our goal is this. Let's just make up a number. Let's say we close at X percent. And okay, great. We need this much pipeline, right? Yeah. How are we going to do that? Is it all on me? Is it all on you? No. All right. How are we tracking this together that we know it's working? That's just at the super, super high level of why are we deciding to do this event? Not just because you want to go golfing with your buddy, but instead because there's a reason and there's people there that we want to talk to. Got it. That's just one part of it. But then the other part of it is just how do we do this together? Because I'm not going to be on every call. And I want you to call my baby ugly, my baby being the sales deck, because if it's not working, I don't care how pretty it is. I want you to tell me that someone came up with an objection because it wasn't really explained very well here. They came up with this objection, which then led them to a competitor. I need to know that. You have to create this culture of not only are we in it together on the same team, I need you to tell me what you're learning out there. I need to actually turn it into something that changes our message that we put out there and deliver and that I enable you to go do. By starting from the very beginning on there is no us versus them, there is no we're just there to spend money and send you to events, but instead we're both accountable. That's the only way that you can do it when speed matters. I think over time, and if you've been at a company for 10 years and you've already got some built in pipeline and momentum, you've got a ton of customers, that's one thing and it's different. It's slower. But if the game is how quickly can we 6x our revenue from last year, well, then we all kind of know it's not impossible, but it's really hard. And if it's really hard and you got a hard job and I got a hard job, we've got a hard job together that we're going to talk about drinks. We're going to war together, right? You build that culture when you're on the same football team and you have this shared experience, but that also a shared goal. I think everything changes and there's no pointing fingers and there's no, I want this attribution. Instead, it's, we've got to move at hyper speed, put all of that friction aside, and how do we do it together? When you're part of teams like that, it's just something special.
I had this vivid visual that a lot of marketing and sales departments work as part of a baton race. Marketing creates leads and you pass it off. And then sales grabs the baton and then they go and they try to close the deal. And you stop the race and you go back and you prepare for the next lead and the next handoff versus we're all in the race the whole way through. We're all accountable.
We're encircling them.
There you go. There are graveyards of CMOs out there that have been perceived as you are only as good as your last lead that you brought into the organization. You're one of the biggest cost centers in the business here. If you're not generating leads that we can close, what role do you have? Where actually the hard part is closing deals. It's not creating the leads. 80% of the effort is closing an SQL. So you can get it to an SQL, however your definition of a qualified SQL is. The hard part comes after that. CMOs today in a modern go-to-market strategy, we can't afford to be just lead passer offers, right?
No,
We
if
have
that's
to
all
be
it was,
involved all the
just
way.
just go to any of these lead gen companies that hit you on LinkedIn every day and just outsource it.
Yeah,
But that's
right.
not what it is, right? If it were that easy, just buy a list from one of the million data brokers that has everybody's email address and call it a day. It just doesn't
Yep.
work like that.
So give me an idea. We've talked conceptually that it's not a handoff, right? That it's a surround strategy, like you just said there. What is different than the way that a typical CMO works with a CRO or chief sales officer in this surround strategy? If you can dig a little deeper for us.
One thing that's nice is we're all in the office together. As someone that's been part of remote teams in the past, and it absolutely can work and it does, but physical proximity has something to do with the culture and the relationship. It really just does. When you're together all the time, whether it's in an exec team meeting or on sales calls or just together talking about an event, it's hard for things to fall through the cracks when you've got that shared responsibility of this is our number for next year. How are we going to do it? As it relates to your question of tactically, what does that look like? It's understanding what are we going to do this year? Are we doing a lot of events? Not only that, but what does an event mean? Is it we just find one of these event vendors and just let them hand it off to us? Or is it for everything we do, we're going to have at least a customer there? We're going to make sure our CEO's there with people that he knows. We're going to do a super high end Michelin star kind of experience. We're not going to just do the timeshare sales where if you got a nice meal, you got to listen to a sales pitch. Who are we going to talk to? And what do we know about them? And who knows them here? Not only that, what do we know about what they're looking for through the community of people that we already know? And are they ready to see something or like, let's hit them up in 3 months? In the meantime, is there anything we can do to help them? If it's something where they're saying, I just got asked by my board, what's my AI strategy? That doesn't mean buy your product, but like, can we actually help them? Can we have one of our AI experts on the phone with them talking about it from the top down? Even better than that, can we have one of our customers go talk to them completely absent us? I'll tell you this, and it's a little bit of a deviation, but good enough. Right before this call, one of our biggest customers, we just sent him a text and said, we have 4 new salespeople starting today. Can you get on a Zoom with us? He said, absolutely, not a problem. So he got on for an hour. And without prompting, he said, listen, what I want to tell you is this. This is what I was trying to solve. This is what I got asked by the board. This is why I decided to talk to you. And it's partially because of meeting in person with our executive team. And then here's how I was able to get it accomplished. Here's how I'm able to measure it. This is what I'm going to show the board next week. And he just like put it in front of us. You don't get that from a BDR just reaching out and trying to sell something transactionally. How many of your customers in the past, in an hour's notice, jump on a Zoom with a full sales team and tell them how he bought and what they should do, how to identify people like him, the landmines to avoid, and that sort of thing? There's really something to be said, and I've given him credit and I'll give him credit again. Guy I worked with way, way long ago at my first startup, Mike Triano, had this concept of scalable intimacy. Really, that's what we're trying to get to. This idea of think of your best friend or think of someone that you really trust. And how do you do that at scale? And by scale, I mean more than one person, right? It's not something that you can put out to the masses, but the real answer is how do you make someone feel special, but also valued? How do you make them feel like an expert that they know what they're talking about? How do you support them? You get that right, and your product's really good and it solves their problem. That's a relationship. I think it's really easy and it sounds cheap to say, we're your trusted advisor or any of those things. And it's easy to say, it's hard to do. But what we're trying to do is really invest that time on the one-on-one basis, and it'll pay off over time. Everyone buys things because they refer. And one of the questions that was asked on this session we had was, how do we find more people like you? Someone legitimately asked us, send cold emails, LinkedIn, whatever. He's like, absolutely not. I don't look at email. I don't look at LinkedIn. The only way I buy is because right now I am basking in the win that I got from buying your product. I'm telling everyone that I know on all our Signal chats and all of our other chats where we talk that you're not invited, but also everyone else talks. All of the people that we've built this great relationship with, and it's not, hey, you bought our product, I'm going to give you money to go. No, it's something more than that. And it's a huge investment, but I guarantee it pays off.
I mean, you actually talked about creating an unfair competitive advantage
That's right.
and how you do that. And it's about using people and relationships to create conversations. I'd love to have you just explain what you meant by that.
Yeah. I think when we look at any kind of sales situation we get into, we're really asking ourselves, where is our unfair advantage? And the reason we ask this is not like manipulation or like, how do we do anything negative? Instead, it's a separate the product from the conversation. If our unfair advantage is that our CEO had them as a customer for 10 years at his last company, that means there's an unfair advantage of trust. It's someone that said, I'm going to do something for you, did it for you, and for 10 years you benefited from it and you believed it. There's an unfair advantage there. There's an unfair advantage of speed. Someone saying, I've got to do this immediately. I have a mandate from the board. I can't hire more people. In fact, I got to get rid of some people. I don't want to do it, but I have to. So, how can you do it quickly? Can we have that unfair advantage of speed? There's a lot of unfair advantages that you have to separate from the product. And it's one of these situations where if marketing is really setting the conditions by which someone can buy, then how do we set the conditions by which we can have someone feel the benefit from what we can give them? To me, like, that's the unfair advantage because they're not going to get that on two battle cards. They're not going to get it from an analyst firm. It's got to be more than that. Like I said before, none of this is easy and it takes a lot of effort, but I think you need effort, you need time, you need investment to have an advantage that goes beyond what you can see on someone's website. But that's really what the unfair advantage is. And if you ask that question every single time you're going into a net new, hey, there's an opportunity there, it really changes the behavior and it makes the sales rep feel less of, I have to close this deal by myself and no one else, to, hey, CEO, get on here, reach out to this guy. Or, hey, actually, one of the women in the product team, you worked with this person a couple of years ago. Can you just see what's going on there? There's an unfair advantage to being human about it without being a sleazy. It's really super nuanced and it takes an awful lot of effort. But any long-term relationship you've ever had with someone that is in the vendor kind of side where it doesn't feel like they're against you or just trying to make a buck from a transaction, that's what makes it.
Everything you said there, in my mind, if I could sum it up as a takeaway from our entire conversation here, is how to create authentic relationships that don't feel like a sales outreach, that don't feel like a marketing drop. And that doesn't work anymore. That's why all the buyers, they're waiting till the very end of the journey to want to even talk to us. We have to rethink how we're doing this. I want to ask you one last
Yeah.
question. It's the most important. It could be the hardest. But here's the question. We have covered a lot of territory. In the context of the funnel is a fraud, what's the single most important takeaway that you want the audience here if they took away nothing else from our conversation? If they remembered one thing, what would that one thing be?
When you think about the people that could be buyers of your product as prospects, as people that you're trying to sell to, I think that leads to one set of behaviors. If you think of someone as a person that is trying to solve a challenge and they don't know about what you have, I think it makes it a different way of addressing and engaging with them. Before we even launched the company, Anna, the other half of my global marketing team, there's only two of us right now, changing that soon, but she sat on a plane next to a CISO and he was really talking about AI, just loved AI, loved AI, loved AI. And we hadn't launched yet. We didn't have anything to show him yet, but she kept in touch. And then once we launched our podcast, we invited him to be on it. He had no idea who we were as a company, but he was just like so excited about AI. And he was so excited that he told this story that I've told a million times and I'll tell it a million and two, which is He went to his team and said, "What are the things you're spending all your time on that you're wasting your time on?" This one woman stepped up and said, "Security questionnaires. I'm spending all my time doing the same thing over and over again." He said, "I want you to take a week and find a way to use AI to automate that whole process. If you do that, I'll give you your full bonus for the year." The next week,
Wow.
she came back to him and said, "Not only did I figure it out, it's running in production now. I'm just looking for what the next project is." She got her full bonus. Eventually, after all of that, they did become a customer. We didn't talk about our product. We had Anna on a plane, but we had that connection of someone we knew what he cared about. We knew that he like really cares about his team. He wanted to find a way. He had to be creative to show them there's a better way than doing things the way they're doing it because he wanted their team to grow. Right? That's the thing that like drives this guy is I love my team and I want them to be able to grow in their career and go as high as they want to go. Think of the investment in the front end of that, where before we ever put a product in front of him, now it's someone that we've done several things with. We'll go to dinner with him. We had his team in, and it was one of his members of his team. It was their birthday, and we brought in a cake and stuff. These aren't tactics, right? This is relationships. Think of all of that stuff first before you ever show your product. What
Yeah.
can you do to make someone believe and want to trust you before you ever give something to them that you ask them to trust?
I got to tell you, I think we have a series of podcasts that we need to do here because I don't want to end. We could go another couple of hours, but the goal of this podcast is to bring C-suite executives together, all B2B companies, ABM go-to-market motion, and rethink what we're doing. What's great is when you moved up the ranks and you first became a CMO, you didn't give up the marketing responsibilities, but you took on the responsibilities of how do we grow companies? And that's the level that you talked about here today. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming on because I look at every podcast as a small part of the rising tide that lifts all boats. And if we can help all of our C-suite executive peers in other B2B companies grow and help their business, fantastic. And I think you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. So Nate, thank you for coming on.
Yep, this was a lot of fun. What an exciting time to do what we're doing.